I'm endorsing Ted Cruz. He's also been endorsed by the Tea Party Express, by Governor Palin, by the great one, Mark Levin. As a matter of fact, he was friends with Mark Levin and many conservatives around the country because he's a solid conservative and would govern and vote conservatively. I hope that's the case. Ted Cruz joins us. When is this primary now?
Sean, it's in 11 days. It's on May 29th, and early voting is this week and next week. So we are right in the midst of it.
All right. Now, it seems that this is another establishment Tea Party conservative showdown that's going on in this race. Now, the establishment supporting the lieutenant governor.
That's exactly right. You know what summed it up best? The Houston Chronicle this week endorsed David Dewhurst, the lieutenant governor, and they said they wanted a senator in the spirit of Lloyd Bentsen and Lyndon Baines Johnson. And David Dewhurst was their man because he's a bipartisan compromiser. And they told him, they said, Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst, you should wear proudly the badge of moderate because that's who you are. I actually agree with them completely, and that's why we can't send another moderate establishment politician. Those are the guys that have put us on a path to going broke, Sean.
What is this wage tax issue that the Wall Street Journal called the fancy disguise for an income tax?
When there was a shortage in cash, Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst was looking for a way to raise more taxes. And he proposed a statewide wage tax that every employer would have paid the state of Texas 2.5% of the wages of every employee in Texas. And the Wall Street Journal said, as you noted, that the Dewhurst wage tax was nothing more than, quote, a fancy disguise for a personal income tax in Texas, which would have killed 40,000 jobs in Texas. Now, we've got way too many moderate Republicans in Washington who are willing to go along with spending increases, with tax increases. It has been establishment career politicians in both parties that have put us on the path to $16 trillion in debt, that have put us on the path to where Greece is. And all over the country, conservatives are standing up and saying, we want a strong conservative fighter. And that's what it's going to take to stop the Obama agenda, to turn our country around.
You know, Ted, I'm sure you've seen this over the course of your lifetime, and maybe it's one of the reasons that you're motivated to run. But there are people that have, over the years, that I have supported, and they get to Congress, they get to the Senate, they get to Washington, they get locked up in that culture. They like to be called congressman and senator, et cetera.
Right.
You know, what are the things that you promised to do, and maybe some of the things you promised not to do?
I will lead the fight to stop the Obama agenda, to defend free market principles, and to restore the Constitution. There will be no senator, bar none, who will be a more relentless, a more strategic, and I believe a more effective advocate of shrinking the size and power and spending of the federal government. And, Sean, I'm asking you on the air, hold me accountable. Play this clip back at me if I do anything less than stand in front with arrows up and down my torso, leading the fight to stop the out-of-control spending and to get rid of our debt.
Well, if we don't stop the bleeding and taking on water in this boat known as the country, I mean, this president, by the end of his 4-year term, is going to have accumulated $6 trillion in new debt. It is a prescription for disaster. You know, we keep hearing from pretty smart people. Paul Ryan, who works with budget numbers, he was on the program earlier in the week. He says we've got like 2 years.
Yep.
Or the markets are going to abandon us. We see now what's going on. We got a run on money in Greece and Spain and elsewhere. We got another bank belly up in Spain. But it's Greece, it's Spain, it's Portugal, it's Italy, it's Ireland. I mean, they're literally spending 100% of GDP, and we're on a path to the same thing. So how do we balance the budget, repeal Obamacare, limit the size of government to a level that we can sustain without raising taxes, and convince the American people that it's in their best interest to live with fewer government programs?
What I think it will take is real leadership. We saw in 2010 a wave of new leaders like Marco Rubio, like Mike Lee, like Rand Paul, like Pat Toomey, like Ron Johnson. And if 2012 continues that wave, if we get another half dozen strong constitutional conservatives, that's what it'll take to repeal every word of Obamacare, to eliminate unnecessary and unconstitutional cabinet agencies like the Department of Education, the Department of Commerce, the Department of Energy, the National Endowment of the Arts, and ideally the IRS by having fundamental tax reform and scrapping the tax code. You know, you talked about Greece. The biggest difference between us and Greece is there are nations that can bail out Greece. There ain't nobody that can bail us out. And I'll tell you, for me, the fight for freedom isn't just some academic matter. My dad was imprisoned and tortured in Cuba. He fled with nothing, coming to America seeking freedom. He washed dishes to pay his way through the University of Texas. And when I was a kid, Sean, my dad used to say to me over and over again, when we faced oppression in Cuba, I had a place to flee to. If we lose our freedom here, where do we go? That's what the stakes are. If we don't stand up now and turn this country around, we're going to lose the shining city on the hill, the freest and most blessed nation in the history of the earth.
You know, Mark Levin was the person that first told me about you, and he's my buddy and one of my closest friends. And, you know, how did you ever get hooked up with him?
Well, I have known Mark for many years.
I say this affectionately. You're supposed to laugh. Was he like this his entire life?
I think he was like this.
He was born 50, wasn't he?
In the cradle. I think he was standing up saying,
"Get off my phone, you creep." Oh. Yeah, all right, sorry. You are running for the Senate. I wasn't talking about you. I mean, he's hilarious, but, I mean, he's brilliant on the other side. I mean, his books are just outstanding.
He is a tenacious fighter. And, look, all of us are so fed up with these go-along-to-get-along, milquetoast Republicans. I mean, is it that hard to find a backbone?
You know what? I had on, you ever watch Chuck Woolery years ago, and he did the Love Connection? You ever watch that show?
Sure.
You know, he's a strong conservative, and he's now fighting for term limits. And I have struggled with this because I've always wanted the American people to be active and involved and informed before elections. And I don't want, limits put on good people that can actually serve, and their experience could be extraordinarily helpful. But I kind of am going along with this because I think it's a bad idea whose time has come, because these guys go to Washington and they just focus on getting reelected. And that prevents them from having a spine. They like being called senator and congressman too much.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think it's been career politicians in both parties that have put us on the path to bankruptcy. And we're seeing the American people stand up. You know, I've said a lot of times, in 1979, it took Jimmy Carter to give us Ronald Reagan. And I think the most long-lasting legacy of Barack Obama is going to be a new generation of leaders in the Republican Party that stand for liberty and the Constitution. You know, I've spent a lifetime fighting for the Constitution. When I was the Solicitor General of Texas, the chief lawyer for the state in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, serving under Greg Abbott, our Attorney General, we led the nation fighting for conservative principles, defending the Ten Commandments, the Pledge of Allegiance, the Second Amendment, and we stood up and fought the World Court and the United Nations and the President of the United States, and we defended U.S. sovereignty and won 6-3. And I think the stakes are so high in Washington. We need proven fighters who have the stripes on their back and are ready to lead the fight. And that's why we've seen conservatives all over the nation, including Governor Sarah Palin and Dr. James Dobson, and the 5 strongest conservatives in the U.S. Senate today, Jim DeMint, Mike Lee, Rand Paul, Pat Toomey, and Tom Coburn, all come together and support this campaign.
I think you're going to win. I mean, I'm looking at the number. I think you're going to take – I wouldn't take anything for granted, but I think you're really – I mean, I was glad when I heard Richard Lugar, Obama's favorite senator, lost. I was happy.
That is exactly right. And, 3 weeks ago, as you know well, Lugar was up 10 points in Indiana, and the media said he could not be beaten. And you endorsed Murdoch, the conservative challenger. Governor Sarah Palin endorsed Murdoch. And last Tuesday, Murdoch didn't just win, he won by 21 points.
A lot of people are asking me from different states, when are you going to endorse? When are you going to do this race? I do them as they come up on purpose. Because, what good would it have been for me to interview you, 4 months ago, and people are going to say, when is the election?
Right. So,
you got to time these things, and Mark has been telling me about you since the beginning of the year, to be honest. And
well, don't hold that against him.
No, I love Levin. Well, anyway, Ted Cruz. So this is 11 days from now, a week from Tuesday.
Right, and early voting is right now.
Early voting is going on right now. How is the early voting looking so far for you?
It's looking good. The turnout looks like it's going to be a Tea Party crowd. It's the most conservative voters. My opponent is worth $200 million, so he's running $2 million a week in nasty attack ads. They're filled with lies. But we've had over 19,000 conservatives all over the country go to tedcruz.org, contribute, and that's what's let us get our message out.
It's amazing. Well, now, what do you think of Governor Romney?
Look, I think defeating Barack Obama is the highest political priority in the country. And I think Governor Romney, as our nominee, will fight and fight hard to do that. And I also think it will be important. If Governor Romney becomes President Romney, I think it will be vital
that we have a conservative House and Senate.
Exactly. If we have 10, 12, 15 strong conservatives in the Senate, we can drive a serious free market agenda, stop the spending.
Hey, when they start going wobbly, that's where the buck stops. I agree with you. I think we need 15, 20 strong senators that are conservative that aren't going to go along. I really do. I think that's going to put the country on the right course.
And, you know, Sean, the best effect of the Indiana race is there are another 30 Republicans right now that are terrified. And I think liberty is never safer than when politicians are scared.
You know, the only person that I've gotten some brushback was I'm supporting in every case the conservative Tea Party candidate. The only exception I made to this, and I understand I'm getting some criticism, is with Orrin Hatch, and I'll tell you why. And I don't know what you think of him or if you are even following that race at all. I don't think Clarence Thomas would be a Supreme Court justice today without him. Reagan worked very closely with Orrin Hatch. And, I look at Roberts and I look at Alito. I mean, having him in that position for that one issue, considering it impacts generations to come, he's done a good job. Even though, and then people are critical of some of the votes that he's had, but I think that issue alone is, you can't forget the good people do, too.
Sure, and there is no doubt that Justice Thomas has been an extraordinary conservative on the court. I mean, as you know, I started my career as a law clerk for Chief Justice William Rehnquist. Yeah. And Justice Thomas is a brilliant, principled conservative, and he has endured unfair, racist, ridiculous attacks, and he has stood with principle and has helped lead the fight to turn the court around and to stop judicial activists that are undermining our Constitution.
You know, when I got a chance to meet him and interview him for his book, my grandfather's son, and I still recommend it, highly recommend it. It's
a wonderful book.
Oh, it's just an amazing book. I mean, his life, his background, and it really kind of puts... look, I say I was delivering papers at 8 and washing dishes, etc. It's nothing compared to, the discipline, the loving discipline of his grandfather. I mean, it's really good stuff.
I'll tell you a very quick story about Justice Thomas. When I was clerking, my co-clerk had been tutoring a young African-American boy from Arkansas who was in junior high, and he brought him up to the court to tour around. And he asked if any of the justices would meet with him. Justice Thomas sat down with this 7th grader from Arkansas and spent 2 hours talking with this boy. And I mean, it was... And for this particular kid, the Supreme Court didn't mean much to him, but Justice Thomas had a picture of himself with Troy Aikman, and that made Justice Thomas the coolest man on earth.
That did it, huh?
At the end of the meeting, Justice Thomas said, listen, I need to give you something as a memento of being here. And on his desk, he had a Super Bowl ticket signed by Emmitt Smith, and he handed it to this young boy, and he said, I'm going to give this to you, but I want you to promise that you're going to get A's next year in school. And this boy with eyes just wide open just nodded and said, yes, sir, I will.
Did he?
That's who the man is. That's where his heart is. He's an extraordinary human being.
I want to find that kid and find out if he got A's. All right, Ted Cruz, it's 11 days from now in a primary in Texas for the U.S. Senate. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Sean, and I would urge all your listeners, I need your votes, I need your help, and please come to tedcruz.org because we need the financial resources to stand up. The moderate establishment is circling the wagons around David Dewhurst, and we need your help to ensure we get a strong conservative and a fighter in the U.S. Senate.
Tedcruz.org, thank you for being with us.